Michael, nice to meet you. Congratulations on Fog of War. How do you feel having the film completed now? Ready to come
Uh,
out?
yeah, I'm so super excited. I'm really proud of it and really happy with what we pulled off with it. And I love the story, the cast, and I mean, more than anything, I love that we just had a great time making it, and that's always an important part for me.
Good, good. I mean, I love period pieces like this, and also now we're adding kind of the spy thriller element because from the very beginning we understand we're looking for someone. And so,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the film.
Yeah, so it's a fun little, well, not fun, I guess, but a little espionage thriller, about a war guy, hurt his leg, he's convalescing, and so he goes to spend some time with his soon to be in-laws, but the government kind of intervenes and says, hey, you're going to be doing a little detective work for us while you're up there, and so from the right from the get-go, he's on edge, thinking, looking out for the bad guy, and so it's just a fun little thriller where we kind of just follow this guy just trying to figure out who really is the enemy here on the home front, which is kind of a different perspective to take on a World War II movie when usually you're on the battlefield.
Yeah, it's different. It takes place in the States now. Essentially, there's even some conversations of like, what have you been fighting for at some point between the two main characters. I think what impressed me the most about the film is how you're able to keep us guessing and keep us on our toes with a relatively small cast. Can you talk
Yeah.
to me about that process for you as a director?
Yeah, that was probably one of the most challenging parts of it was figuring out what to let the audience in on. I mean, there's a handful of scenes that actually we ended up cutting, and just little Easter eggs that we thought were maybe a little too on the nose. Like there's a moment when when Gene sees Penny at night when he comes back, he's like, "Oh, you're back," and that's when they kind of start realizing everything. We had originally it scenes opens up where she has like a bloody handkerchief where she's hiding it, and so that would have been like a little too giveaway of her. So there's a lot of moments like that throughout that the editor Kevin and I really went through with a fine-tooth comb. It's like, okay, do we want to show this or not this? And so that was kind of fun but challenging to figure out what to give the audience and what not to. And now it's kind of hard for me to watch the movie. I'm like, oh, did we give too much here? Did we not give enough? I still second guess it to this day.
I think as an artist, there's never going to be a point where you're 100% satisfied with your work.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's good. It means
Exactly.
you care about it. So that way your audiences also care about it. Um, it's funny doing these interviews. While I love the genre, it's tough to do sometimes because there's like certain aspects of the film that we love to talk about, but we can't, or we really want to talk about certain reveals. Like, and then it gives away the fun of the whole film. But I guess one of the things that we can talk about is really the chemistry between Jake and Brianna, because um, kind of, but not just them, but really with all the characters, there needs to be a certain level of likability and
Hmm.
relatability, but also this kind of like little gray area where could it be them? Could it actually be them? Could there be a giant twist? And is it Gene all along? Is it Penny all along? Is it Robert? There's and that's really the whole point because if you start maybe figuring out too soon, then it kind of ruins the rest of the movie.
Right. Yeah. And so that's where it's like, we had the farmhand on Jock, but then we had like, the other character, Geza, that lived at the farm. So we tried to sprinkle enough little misdirection where we could, little red herrings that, without having too much of it.
And what was the process in casting really Jake and Brianna together because they do have really good chemistry together. It's believable that they're together, but some of the issues that they have to do with the fact that this is during World War II. He's trying to recover from an injury. Tell me a little bit about casting them.
Yeah, I mean, it was a dream to get both of them, and we actually went after both of them right off the top because Gene or Jake has that look, that all-American military look, with, the chisel jawline, he's good looking. So that was just something we really wanted, that look and feel where you're gonna want to follow him through this journey, and then we wanted to kind of counter that with Brianna, the typical all-American girl. Well, that's what we really wanted, something just all-American, but then there's there's some twists. I'll not give it away, but yeah. So it was fun to we were working with the talent agents, and like they were kind of really recommending them, and we really liked them, and we were just like, well, let's go after both of them, and hopefully they both sign on, and they did. So we got really lucky that they both enjoyed the script and wanted to sign on for it.
I mean, with that said, also how excited were you to have John Cusack and also Mira on set for you guys?
Yeah, that was so nerve-wracking. Like that was, I mean, yeah, he's yeah, with their careers and like everything they've done. I learned a lot. Like I that was so it was like going to school actually almost because like they brought a lot to the table for us and just as actors. And this is my second feature, and I look back like, oh wow, I wish I would have known what I've known after working with them because he was really gracious towards me and knew that I was still kind of young directing and really helped me out a lot. And he'd get like call me late at night. We'd go over scenes and stuff. And then even on set, he'd pull me to the side and he'd talk about scenes that like Rihanna was in and some of the other cast and be like, oh, and just kind of guide me and that like gave me a lot of good tips on just, what it's like to, what I need to do as a good director to kind of work with him and just kind of showed like the language. That's always my weakest point, I'd say, is trying to get the right performance out of actors sometimes. And he kind of gave me some good tips on like, hey, like this is how maybe it's a good way to approach a cast on something and really bring out the best performance. And he was so gracious and kind, and I love working with him, and I hope to do it again sometime.
That's great to hear that an actor would be so invested in the project. How did that make you feel, really, as you're having those conversations to see that no, he wasn't just interested in his roles, but getting to have those conversations, broader that even he's not involved in, like you're saying.
Yeah, it was so interesting because like you're like, oh man, he just has such a great mindset on just the story because he's been doing it for so long. It just all makes sense to him, and so that it was just like so great to hear like his insight because he'd like look at scenes that yeah like I said he's not even in and he would give notes on to like oh well why is that character saying that in that scene. He's like they should probably say something more in this line because then that sets up something else for another character. And I was like oh wow like he's really digging in deep to the entire story. And it was just really fascinating to see how he handled that and it definitely changed the way I view like scripts now and how I work in that field.
It's funny, early on in my journalistic career, I used to just do a lot of roundtables with other journalists. And then at one point, it was for a show on Amazon called Utopia. For whatever reason,
Yeah.
nobody showed up to a certain room, and it was just John Cusack and I. And they're like, "Well, just you and him." Oh, I was so terrified. I
Yeah,
I
yeah.
will never go back and take a look at what that sounded like because I probably sound like a weird baby giraffe or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
now, how did you make sure to get the period right? Because I mean, you gotta make sure you have the houses look right, the clothing looks right, and some maybe even some of the language. What was your research and development with that?
Yeah, so I mean, we did some we knew we had to shoot in Connecticut, so that was kind of for tax credit reasons, and so we quickly just looked online on like the Film Commission's website, and we just felt like, oh man, they have a whole trove of historical sites that we could use, and so we found it's called the Nestor Lane House. It's an old historical farmhouse, and it's just the state owns it, and it's part of a museum. And so we reached out to them, and that's what really opened the door to everything we needed. My wife is a production designer on it, actually, and so she started making contacts with the historical society there that was running the museum, and that's when we met a guy named Doug Kelly, who, I mean, it's a volunteer job that he had there, and he just knows everything inside and out from like we would have China patterns. And he'd be like, oh no, that's the wrong time period. He could just knew by looking at the China pattern. And so then we really relied heavily on him. And so like there were some scenes too where it's like even to hair and makeup, like we'd have questions like, well, would her hair be up in this scene? He's like, well, no, women, they didn't do that then. They would have their hair like this, even if they were casual. And so we just did a lot of research, like yeah, like looking at the time period on the 1940s, what was especially with technology too, because back then, that's where we found out you'll see some scenes has fireplace light and some has lights, actual lights, electricity. And so electricity was more scarce back then for like out in the rural areas, but it wasn't uncommon either. So that's why we was like, okay, so we can allow some electricity, but we also need to also still use like candles and fires when we can too, just to kind of show the mix of it all. And a lot of that just came from the production designer and the historical society that she was working with, giving us all the information that we needed to make it work.
That's amazing. I'll be honest with you. Anytime I go to any of those sites, uh, those are the people I want to talk to, the volunteers that are
Yeah.
there, because they have some great stories usually about, whatever it is that we're visiting, whether it's a lighthouse, whether it's a house. So that's great. That's great that you're able to find a house of that caliber for your shooting and have to save a little bit of money there.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on the Fog of War. It was really fun to figure out who done it, and it was great. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Manny. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. It was nice to meet you.